This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everybody. I trust you can hear me. My name is Rosie Sheldon and I work as a senior trainer at TSG Training. I'll be presenting the webinar today. So that you can hear me as opposed to others, please could you put yourselves onto mute, and I'll be able to take some questions afterwards. I'll be talking about the Selenium Tester Foundation course today, and if you want to know more, please contact us. The next course is on the 1st of April, and then on June the 17th, and lastly the 23rd of September, and these are all in London. This webinar is being recorded and will go onto our website within the week, www.tsg-training.co.uk. So if you haven't yet put yourselves onto mute, if you could, that would be great. Agenda. So today I'm going to be talking about what's the purpose of test automation, when and who's best placed to use Selenium WebDriver, key disciplines covered by the course, and then we're going to have a mini lesson, creating a script. And as I said at the end, a summary and time for a few questions. To start, what's the purpose of test automation? Why are people so interested in it? What are the advantages? What's the upside? Well, running automated tests may be more efficient than running them manually. This both reduces the time needed for test execution and or allows us to run more tests per build. As you'll know, it increases the frequency that some tests can be run, enables us to perform some tests that cannot be executed at all manually, reliability or efficiency tests, frees up manual testers to run more interesting, more complex manual tests, exploratory testing, for instance. Of course, it reduces mistakes made by bored or distracted manual testers, especially when endlessly repeating regression tests. Another advantage, this means that we can execute tests earlier in the process. For instance, running automated tests on the continuous build machine, both giving quicker feedback on system quality and removing defects from the software earlier. It means we can execute tests outside normal business hours, and it helps increase confidence in the build. But there's also disadvantages, the downside. Got increases in costs, and that includes the high startup costs. Got delays, costs, and mistakes from testers as they learn new technologies. And occasionally, complexity just becomes overwhelming. Other disadvantages that the test team needs software development skills or other people on hand who are happy to help. There's going to be considerable and ongoing maintenance needs for the tools, but don't forget the environments and the test assets. And of course, automation requires all the processes and disciplines of software development. It is development work. And as a result, sometimes concentrating on the automation makes the testers lose sight of testing as the risk management activity. Sometimes you get false positives when the automation fails, and they're not system under test soot failures, but they're due to defects in the automation itself. And without clever programming in the automated tests, tools are literal-minded. To be frank, they're stupid, but testers are not. So these are disadvantages. However, you need to remember that not all advantages are obtainable in all projects, and not all disadvantages occur in all projects. But by paying close attention to detail and using good engineering processes, you can increase the likelihood of the good outcomes and minimize the bad outcomes that might result from the automation project. So if those are the advantages and you've not been put off by the disadvantages, what are your test objectives? To know the purpose of test automation in your context, you have to line up the automation objectives with the test objectives from your test policy. Maybe step one is to consider getting a test policy. These themselves should reflect the business objectives. Automation is a cost. You need to demonstrate that there will be a benefit to introducing automation. The common test objectives displayed here can all be achieved using test automation, as we've just seen on the previous slide. Improve the efficiency of testing by reducing the cost of each test run. Increase test coverage by testing more and test aspects that we might not be able to manually test. Reduce the amount of time needed for running tests. Shift left. Being able to push more testing earlier in the software development lifecycle to find and remove defects from the code at the first opportunity. And lastly, increasing the frequency with which tests can be run. Maybe some of these are included in your test objectives, in which case test automation should be a consideration. But in addition to the advantages and the disadvantages, you may have technical constraints, you might have managerial constraints. And these need to be taken into account, because one thing is true. No organisation has ever accidentally built a successful automation project. So what is test automation? Well, it covers many aspects of testing, although it's often just used to mean test execution automation. But even using this limited definition, test automation is not just running tests. It's a process, designing a test automation solution. It's introducing automation code in addition to the software under test code. And all that entails is the documentation, the test cases, the test environments, the test data. Test automation is all about using tools to control and set up the preconditions, the test preconditions, to execute tests, and to compare the actual outcomes with the expected outcomes. In addition, you then have to implement the automated tests, monitor and control test execution, and then, of course, interpret the results using the automated logging and screenshots, and ensure that there are clear reports produced. Test automation covers many aspects of testing, but no tool does everything. And certainly a 3-day foundation course can't cover everything. The Selenium Tester Foundation syllabus focuses on the automatic execution of functional tests. Incidentally, the advanced level course, Test Automation Engineer, which TSG Training also runs regularly, covers these aspects in more depth if you're interested. So who can use Selenium WebDriver? To understand test automation, you must first understand what a manual test script is and how it can be used. As a bare minimum, a manual test script contains an abstract task to do. It doesn't need to be changed when the actual software changes. For example, a task might be add record to database. This is an abstract idea. No matter what version of the database, this abstract task can be produced, assuming a manual tester has the domain knowledge to translate it into concrete actions. Then the tester needs to know what data to use for the task. And finally, the tester needs to know what behaviour to expect. And that's the crux of the difference between an automated script and a manual script. The manual test script only adds value in the hands of a manual tester. The test script writer could add lines and lines into the manual script to help the test executor understand how to deal with an issue, but mostly we don't, because the manual testers are human with intelligence and experience, and that enables them to figure out the issue on their own, and with the intelligence to know when to ask for help from an expert. A knowledgeable manual tester will be able to answer issues that arise, like how long must I wait for something to happen? What happens if I get a fixable return result? Try to open a file but got a drive not mapped error message, or whatever. What happens if I get a warning? What happens if I'm supposed to wait 5 seconds, but actually it took 5.1 seconds? So these are questions that might need to be addressed by the manual tester. Who can use Selenium WebDriver? Well, someone who understands manual test scripts. Remember the context and the reasonableness. Now, the automated test script has to be able to do the same. An automated script, if simply recorded, has a limited understanding of what it can do if something other than the expected result occurs. This is if it's simply recorded, it only has one response to the unexpected. Throw an error. It needs added intelligence. And this is what the test engineer can do. The test engineer has to build into the automated test script this intelligence via programming. And this is why automation now works better. Intelligence in the automated script. By programming, we can capture the thought processes that a manual tester has, the context and the reasonableness of the result, and start making automation add more value by more often actually completing the test rather than failing it early. But not all manual tests can be automated. A business case needs to be made before we automate our testing. Will the overall cost of automating the test be returned by being able to run it X times over Y months? And many times we're going to work out this answer and it will be no. Some manual tests will remain because there's no positive return on investment, no ROI for automating them. Some manual tests simply can't be automated because of the thought process of the manual tester is essential to the success of that, like with exploratory testing, fault attacks, and other types of manual testing. Manual testing still required for the success of the testing effort. So when can Selenium WebDriver be successfully used? Well, when you want to execute functional web application tests. Selenium WebDriver is a framework allowing test scripts to control web browsers. Now, automation does not happen by accident. Success doesn't happen by accident. The chances of success, though, are increased if you've got a long-term plan. And this long-term plan is aligned with the needs of the business. You've got solid, intelligent management behind you. You've got a stark attention to detail, close attention to detail. But you've also got process maturity. You're going to need a formalized architecture and a framework, timely and adequate training, and also mature level of documentation. So those are things that will help success. But also the ability to automate often rests on the testability of the system under test, the SOT. Frequently, the interfaces of the SOT are just not suitable for testing. The success or failure of automation may hinge on getting special or private interfaces, often called hooks, from the developers of the system. There are several different SOT interfaces that we can automate at, and Selenium works at the UI level. This syllabus includes tips and techniques to reduce the brittleness and enhance the usability while testing at this level. Selenium WebDriver works by using its application programming interfaces to make direct calls to a browser, using the browser's native support for automation, as each supported browser works slightly differently. It's a programming interface for developing scripts and can use many different programming languages. For example, C#, Java, JavaScript, Objective-C, Perl, Ruby. This course uses Python. Many of these languages I've just mentioned also have open source testing frameworks available. What does the course cover? Well, as you can see, correctly apply test automation principles to build a maintainable test automation solution. Being able to implement those Selenium WebDriver scripts to execute functional web application tests, as I said. And then the key is about maintainable scripts. So how does the course do this? Well, there's 4 main areas covered in the course. We've got some basics, and I've run through some of these already. Objectives, advantages, disadvantages, and limitations. You've got to be pragmatic. What are the success factors? What might go wrong, but also what are the benefits? And metrics. But then there's also thinking about web applications. There's a bit to give people insight into HTML and XML documents. And why we do that is we need to work out how can we find things in those documents. So applying XPath and CSS locators. The largest part of the course is about how to use Selenium WebDriver. And this is about logging and reporting and different WebDriver commands, and also how you can, the different strategies that are available to locate the GUI elements. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very important that you can write maintainable test scripts. And there's different factors that can make your scripts more maintainable: wait mechanisms, page objects, and of course, keyword-driven testing principles. Right, in the agenda, I promised you a mini script writing lesson. First, here is a script pasted into the presentation. So we're going to go through this steadily because I have no idea what your background is. In case you've never seen something like this before, I'm just going to step through. So first of all, the script is code, and code should be commented. The comments are ignored when the script is executed, but they give us information about the script. It's good practice to comment the code continually, appropriately, not too much, but not too little. We need WebDriver logging and sleep, so they need to be imported, ready for later. This line here defines the test. This test is called test webinar hello world. And I'm going to execute this script using PyTest, which is a Python testing framework. PyTest will search and run all the test cases with the extension .py in the current and in the child subdirectories that either start or finish with test. So the naming convention is very important if you're using PyTest. You can log whatever detail you need to have the confidence that the test is running successfully, and if it's not, so that you can work out which step has failed. Logging provides critical information for debugging, and there's logging throughout this script. The WebDriver interface is the starting point for all users of the Selenium WebDriver API. Instantiating the WebDriver interface is the first step in writing your Selenium test. So here it is. This instantiates a browser driver. The next step is to navigate to the web page that you want to test. And you do this by invoking the get method on the driver variable. The get method gets the URL of, gets the URL of the web page that you want to test as an argument. Next, we have the assertion. This is where the test has the expected result. The assertion could evaluate to true, in which case the test passes, or false, where the test has failed. And if the test fails, you can provide a message here. Because this is a demonstration, in order to slow the test down for our purposes, a sleep's included, so the web page is displayed long enough for us to see it. And then last but not least, we've got quit, and this closes the driver in the browser. If we used close, that would just close the browser. Now, before we run this script, and I'm running it live, so fingers crossed, I want to give you a quick explanation of how we run scripts on the course. We use a virtual machine running a distribution of Linux operating a system called Ubuntu. The course details the steps necessary to operate the VM to successfully complete the exercises, the course exercises. I've already opened a terminal window, Control-Alt-T, and in a moment I'm going to execute a script by typing pytest from the current directory. This will execute the test you've just seen, and after a few seconds the test case will open a browser set to the URL from the script, the Python URL, and after 5 seconds, do you remember that sleep, the browser is going to close and we'll see the terminal window with a message. So we've just seen this script. Let's run it. So here's the terminal window, and this is where I'm going to type in pytest. I've already navigated to the correct place. So here we can see the test session started at the top. We've got live log calling here. We can see the web page is opened, and now it's shut. So let's go through what we can see in our screen here. So at the top, we've got that the test session starts. PyTest was looking for everything it could in the directory that it was started from. It found one item, and it found this. Test webinar, hello world PyTest. So there it is. We watched this build up, the live log call. And this is the login information from the script, beginning the test, hello world. And that was from line 9. And then line 11 was Chrome driver up and running. And then 14, Python page is open. And finally, if you see this message, all went well. Happy Selenium training course. Importantly, it's very clear that it's passed. And not only that, but how long it took, 13.75 seconds. Now over on this side, this is where we edit our Python files on the course. This is called Phony, and it's a Python IDE for educational environments. And I'll give you a second just to look at that again in conjunction with the terminal. So this was the script that's been executed. Down here, this is where we can do our debugging if necessary. And that is the end of the script taster. So I'm now going to return to the slides and close very shortly. So you've seen a script. It's a very practical course. That's just a taster for some of the things that get done on the course. So in summary, Selenium is suitable to automate functional web application tests in any life cycle. I showed you the 4 disciplines, the 4 core disciplines covered in the Selenium Test Foundation course: automation basics, test automation of web applications, how to use Selenium WebDriver with lots of practical exercises, and creating maintainable test scripts. So in summary, automated scripts can be written by testers, and come and find out if you can utilize it in your workplace. It may be that this isn't an appropriate course for you at this time, but you might be interested in some of the other courses that TSG Training runs. This is just a couple of them. Please look at the website if you're interested in other courses. There's the Advanced Test Automation Engineer that I mentioned earlier. There's also Advanced Test Analyst, the Advanced Security Tester, and then on the Agile side, Scrum Master Pro, and of course the ISTQB Advanced Technical Tester. Do please contact Paula or email us via the website if you'd like more information. So that's me done my talking, but feel free to hang around just for a few minutes if you've got any questions. Otherwise, goodbye. Hope to see you at some point. Any questions? If you'd rather not raise questions here, do please feel free to email me via the web address earlier, and this presentation will be has been recorded and will be on the website.